Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis Wright and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday evening for us and with us. An interesting conversation we're going to have tonight. Have an esteemed panel ready to take your questions and deal with issues that we believe are of interest to you. The show always goes better when you join in. So if you would, you see the information at the bottom of the screen, ways you can join the conversation. And the neat thing, again, that Hollis Wright does each and every week, they make attorneys standing by live to speak with you and to take your call. So if you pick up the phone and give them a call, the opportunity to speak with an attorney from the firm of Hollis Wright. Leading our conversation from the firm of Hollis Wright, managing partner Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
You too. Hope you had a great week.
I did indeed. Thank you.
I'm excited about this show for a number of reasons.
Right.
The least of which is our guest, Barry Walker with Walker Law, is an old-time personal friend, one of the savviest dressers that I know, and also an outstanding lawyer in a lot of areas. He's going to be talking about medical negligence tonight because it's an important topic that needs to be addressed, and the viewers need to be able to ask questions associated with that issue. But Barry's just an outstanding lawyer in this area. He knows the law, and he's been around for a long time. As I mentioned before we started the show, he and I clerked together some 20 years ago. So First of all, welcome. Good to see you again, my good friend. You doing well?
Glad to be here. Very well.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with your firm right now.
Well, we're a boutique law firm specializing in medical negligence and catastrophic personal injury. So we usually have 20 cases or less because they all require litigation, and we just want to give all the attention and care we can to each case and do the best we can for our clients.
Talk a little bit about that issue that you just raised, because I think it's so important. There are firms out there that are volume practices.
Right.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and they have enough lawyers to manage that.
That's
and
right.
then there are firms that are more boutique and they handle a smaller amount of cases with the intent of giving more attention to those cases. That's kind of an important issue for your firm, isn't it?
It is a very important issue. Like your firm, we handle very complex cases, and they take a lot of time and attention as well as our resources. And so in order to do the very best we can for our clients, we made a conscious decision to focus on fewer cases. And like you said, nothing against other business models, but that is what works best for us and what we believe gives us the ability to give our clients the care their cases deserve and just have laser-like focus on them.
I've found over the years, Barry, that having a really good staff that is able to help manage that practice is super important. We've got that. I know you've got that too.
Right. And that may be the most demanding part of the practice sometimes, is getting like-minded people in a like-minded team around you. Absolutely.
Let's talk for a moment about this topic and kind of jump off into medical negligence.
Sure.
Is medical negligence something you've been handling those type of cases for a long time, or is it a specialty? Kind of explain it to me.
Those are cases I've been handling since the inception of my practice. It's something I'm passionate about. Nothing against the medical profession or community, because none of the acts of negligence are purposeful, but I find that when something happens, there's a culture of, or a conspiracy of silence, where they want to cover things up, and that's not how you fix the problem going forward. We all know about quality assurance and peer review and how those things are used to kind of insulate the actual patient from knowing what happened to them, why it happened, assuming they survived a procedure that went wrong. But if they did not, their family never gets closure. They never know what happened because the medical providers clam up.
You know, and we're going to talk more about that.
Right.
I know that this show is not about every doctor is doing it the wrong way. There are lots of doctors, as you mentioned, that are doing a fantastic job. Here's the question. Is it a widespread issue, do you think, kind of nationally? I know we hear about it, but is it a widespread issue that needs to be addressed?
It absolutely is. Medical mistakes and errors are pervasive among healthcare providers. And statistics say that probably between 190 or 200,000 cases of medical negligence occur each year, and those are the ones that we just know about that are reported because the hospitals and all healthcare providers have a duty to report.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. Let me just say this. When we come back, I do want to talk about the issue of kind of how you manage these cases and how they need to be investigated early.
All right, that sounds good. We'll pick up there. We're heading to break. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple. Provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into the Attorneys Medical Malpractice Law, our topic of conversation tonight. Would love to have you join our conversation. You see those ways at the bottom of the screen there for you to do so. Also, attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by live right now just to speak with you, so take advantage of that opportunity. Josh?
You know, and we talk a lot about the fact, David, that if someone calls, texts, or emails, those calls, texts, and emails are confidential. We're more than happy to answer those questions without somebody having to publicly get on the air, that kind of thing. So just make sure we always want to make sure people understand and respect the fact that if they have a legal question, especially in this area of the law, which is an issue where people want to be a little more confidential, we can answer that question confidentially for them, either call, text, or email. All right, so Barry, I saw the firm stat coming in. And those numbers are staggering. The amount of money that's spent, not only in the medical industry, but for care associated with potential errors.
Right.
It is a pretty widespread issue that affects folks all across the country.
Absolutely. Medical errors are pervasive and happen in the hundreds of thousands. And those are just the ones, like I said, that are actually reported. And so part of our mission, Josh, as you know, is to shed light when these things occur so that they don't occur anymore. So it's very important, given the pervasiveness of the problem and that it happens at every hospital many times per year, to open up that culture and have medical providers communicate with patients and let them know that they made a mistake and tell them how the mistake occurred. And if that were the case, there would be less medical negligence lawsuits, in my opinion.
One of the issues that I learned in my role as trial lawyer president over the last couple of years is working with the legislature. And one of the things that I learned is the legislature tempers, if you will, or provides a governor on lawyers' ability to bring suits in medical negligence cases through the Medical Liability Act. Talk just for a minute about some of the things that make medical negligence cases more difficult than a standard civil case like a car accident, a trucking case, etc.
Well, as you mentioned, the Medical Liability Act is quite a hurdle for us to overcome because we have a burden of proof in these cases, but the Medical Liability Act restricts our ability to get the evidence we need to prove our case because all the evidence is being held by the hospital and they cloak it under different vehicles like quality assurance and peer review, meaning that if a mistake occurs, they immediately say, well, we've reviewed everything and so therefore it's confidential and you can't see it. Also, the cost of prosecuting a medical negligence case is just burdensome. As you know, $50,000 to $100,000 is relatively cheap to prosecute an ongoing medical negligence case for 2 or 3 years. And so we have to be very selective in the cases we take. We want to help everybody, but when you're spending that kind of money, you have to be very careful about the cases you take. So the law is oppressive and somewhat unfair in my opinion. The cost of medical negligence is burdensome and oppressive even for us to undertake these cases. And so it makes it hard to help everybody that really needs help.
And one of the questions I was going to ask, Barry, is, you know, every case that comes in the door is not a medical negligence case that gets filed, right?
Absolutely not.
You got to be selective, and you mentioned that.
Right.
What in Alabama, in today's climate of a very conservative venue, which I think Alabama is,
Right.
What parameters do you generally use for purposes of medical negligence cases? And I'm not saying
Right.
hard, fast rules. I know
Right.
you'll evaluate a lot of different things, but in
That's
the
correct.
cases that you take and file, what do you see as trending as the type cases that actually get filed?
Well, I'm finding that there are a lot of egregious medication errors that are taking place now where patients are either getting the wrong medication and it causes their death or a catastrophic injury. So I think that's an area where a lot of mistakes occur because there's a disconnect between the hospital pharmacy, the doctors and the nurses who are all supposed to work collaboratively together, and they're not communicating, and as a result, mistakes occur.
David, I'll tell you, the number of times, and this is a little out of the area of where Barry's space is in the medical negligence side, there are a lot of times our firm hears these horror stories about how a patient received at a pharmacy the incorrect medication, and we're evaluating a medication case that most of the time doesn't even relate to doctors. It relates to the pharmacy. And that's not to say at all, and we're certainly not saying today that all doctors are bad and all pharmacies are bad. That is not what we're saying. But people need to be vigilant. If you see, for example, a medication that you have consistently taken, and all of a sudden the pill color changes or the pill size changes or something changes on the label, you need to ask your pharmacist, because you never know when that mistake can be made. Those folks are doing the best they can too, but a lot of times they can make mistakes just like anybody else can, and when that happens, it can have catastrophic outcomes and responses.
A question we've got here from Donald. Donald asks, what do you say to those people who believe that malpractice lawsuits are driving up the cost of health care for everyone?
Well, I would say to him that that is untrue, that there have been studies that show there's no relationship between the number of malpractice suits and health insurance premiums. And in fact, insurance companies continue to make large profits. I know that there's a lot of issue out here with Obamacare and medical insurance and lawsuits and how they drive up the cost of care, but there's simply no connection between the two. And I just think that that's something that's said by big business, industry, and insurance companies to dissuade people from bringing lawsuits and to create this culture where it makes it much more difficult for us to help people who've really been injured or harmed by medical negligence.
It's a little bit of a incorrect statement or a misnomer for those arguments in this respect, David, and we talk a lot about this on the show. You know, people think that personal injury lawyers are filing all the lawsuits in society and it's driving up costs generally. The reality, and we've talked about this and we've cited a lot of statistics, is only about 5 to 10% of the actual filings in court systems are from injury lawyers related to injury claims. The rest of the system is based on businesses bringing suit against individuals for collections, landlord-tenant related issues, or businesses suing other businesses. And so the personal injury space takes up a very small component of the actual system itself. And the same is also true with reference to the medical negligence side itself. Talk for a minute, Barry, getting back into that area, the medical negligence side. Talk a little bit about experts. I know a question we often face is, why are most of the experts out-of-state experts if there is a medical negligence case that actually is filed?
Well, because in the medical community, a doctor might be shamed or dissuaded or discouraged from being an expert in an area where he lives or even in the state where he lives. So for example, if I take a medical negligence case here in Birmingham and Jefferson County, no matter how straightforward the case is, how egregious the facts are, you and I are hard pressed to find a local expert who's willing to give an opinion on that case. And that likewise dries up the cost of prosecuting these cases and makes it much more difficult. Last medical negligence case I had to get doctors from New York and Nevada who were fantastic doctors, but I should have been able, and I wish I could have been able, to get local doctors to work with me on a very straightforward issue, but they're always discouraged from doing so.
For the most part, I know there are some very small exceptions here. These cases require experts, don't they?
Absolutely. You know, there are a narrow a line of cases where things are simply within the purview of a layperson, like a surgeon leaving in a sponge or an instrument, which any of us could deem to be negligence without expert testimony. But the law requires that in order to prove a deviation from the standard of care, that a safety rule was violated that harmed the patient, you've got to have a similarly situated doctor or nurse to say what they should have done and how they deviated from that standard of care or the safest treatment.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk through and I want to almost role play like what Barry would do in circumstances where he has a client that comes in and the client thinks that they've had medical negligence or been involved in a circumstance involving medical negligence, and how Barry evaluates that, and how a lot of those cases never materialize into suits, and how sometimes you have to explain to clients in today's climate here in Alabama, that's not a viable lawsuit even though you think you've been wronged. So we'll kind of talk through that because I think that's important and it's eye-opening for the clients.
Look forward to that. We'll do that whenever we come back. Our final break of the evening. A couple of reminders here. You can follow the firm on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook just wrapped up a big giveaway, so always some great reasons to follow the firm. Or just like the page, search Hollis Wright. You can also find them on Twitter. It's Hollis_Wright to find them there. And we'd love to have you join the conversation. The final segment of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. When someone whose unreasonable conduct causes an injury to someone else, the law says that person is negligent. So it seems the injured person should receive some type of damages, right? Not always so in Alabama. In tonight's Legal 411, we answer the question, what is contributory negligence and comparative fault? Alabama is one of only 4 states in the nation to withhold damages based on contributory negligence, meaning if you are at fault even just a little, you cannot be allowed any damages in a case. For example, in a case where a defendant may be 99% at fault for hurting you, if you are found to be 1% at fault, Alabama law says you get nothing. 4 states, Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, and Alabama, plus the District of Columbia, are the only places in the country where a defendant can completely avoid paying if the injured person is even 1% at fault. This is very different from comparative fault, the measure used in 46 states. There are 2 versions of this system, but both essentially allow money damages based on the percentages. For example, if the injured person was 20% at fault for causing an accident, then the recovery for medical bills and wages is reduced by 20%. Numerous studies across the country show that people who live in comparative fault states believe this system of justice is more fair. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will always respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. This is our final segment. So if you want to speak live to an attorney from Hollis Wright standing by live, take advantage of that. Just a few minutes remaining of that opportunity. So be sure and take advantage of that. Josh?
All right, so Barry, let's talk for a minute.
Sure.
Case comes in your front door. They have a meeting with you, and they start to walk through their documents, their medical records, and kind of what happened to them. I know not every case amounts to a medical negligence case. What are some of the things that you walk through to evaluate that case and to explain to the client in circumstances where it may not be, it may not warrant an actual filing itself? How do you kind of handle that?
Well, I listen to them patiently because I understand whether their injury is significant or not, or permanent or not, is very, very important to them. But one thing I look at in evaluating a case is the permanency of the injury, the seriousness of the injury. I'm frequently contacted and consult with people who were victims of a medical error, but they're going to make 100% recovery. And so I can't justify the time and expense of prosecuting that case. And I explain it to them and explain to them the fact that it would cost us more to prosecute and pay for the case than I could actually recover for them, because thank goodness, thank God, they're going to make a full recovery. And so that's a scenario that I face all the time. And sometimes it's a lot closer call in terms of the harm that was caused and the damages, but I just explained to people the barriers that are in place that prevent us from taking every case we'd like to take. And that is the most common scenario where someone is not permanently injured and they're going to recover.
How do these cases turn, in your mind, a lot on what's in the medical records themselves?
Absolutely they do, because, hey, that's how we prove our case, along with the medical records and the expert analysis of the medical records. So one thing I always tell clients is that it is so important to act as soon as possible if you or your loved ones you believe have been a victim of medical negligence, so that we can procure the medical records and review them, so that we can make sure the medical records are complete, so that we can make sure there are no irregularities, no forgeries, or that something has not been destroyed or taken out of the record.
Question we've got here: is there a state board who can deal with complaints against physicians, and why is the number of disciplinary actions against doctors so low?
That is a very, very good question. There is a state board that licenses and governs doctors, and so I would say one reason they're low is just that culture of silence, and so it's difficult for people to discipline themselves and be very hard on their profession, and so they're easier to rationalize, I believe, the mistakes that are made. Josh?
Talk just for a minute about informed consent and how a lot of times that is probably a response that you have to give to the client to say, look, this is a known medical issue.
Right.
I can't take this case. Is informed consent an issue you deal with quite a bit?
It is an issue I deal with quite a bit, and I'm happy when I can prosecute a case with a informed consent element to it. But as you know, the doctor has the duty to explain the procedure to you and the risk and benefits that come with that procedure. And if he does so and something happens and a known risk occurs during that procedure, he may not necessarily be liable for that, because it's just a known risk of engaging in that particular medical procedure. But many times clients are not informed about the dangers of a procedure, so that they can make an informed decision, because they could say, no, it's not an emergency, I don't need to have that done.
And that's just part of the evaluation that's done in these cases, to make sure that the client understands that there are going to be some things they were supposed to be informed of, but there are also some known complications associated with certain surgeries that doesn't make it medical negligence if something goes wrong. You're not guaranteed as a patient a perfect outcome. That's not always going to be the case.
Right.
There are going to be times when things happen, but those are known complications. But you are allowed and you're required to receive informed consent, so you can make a good informed decision as to whether or not this is a proceeding or not. And that really comes down to, and we see it a lot too, and I see it personally as a patient, is there are certain doctors that have a really good bedside manner and are willing to communicate with you and take their time and be patient and answer questions, and some of those that are just kind of going through the motions. And so, that issue comes up quite a bit.
Yeah. Right. Less than 4 minutes remaining. We want to try to get as much in that time as we can. Question we have here: do I have a case against a doctor who prescribed me a drug for treatment but failed to tell me that it was part of an experimental program?
I would say some lawyers might think that's a pretty black and white issue, but I think it's a close call because if it is a life-threatening drug, I actually had a case like this not too long ago where the situation was different. This person was in the hospital, but they were prescribed a very potent medicine that they didn't need, that could really injure them and cause them permanent damage, and they were not fully informed about the risk associated with that drug, and they weren't told that there were safer ways to treat their hypernatremia without them even having the drug. So that's something I'd need to look at on an individual case and make an assessment. Josh?
And you can have 3 different lawyers evaluate a medical negligence case and have 3 different results, can't you?
Absolutely, you sure can.
And I would assume that's a lot of the reason why if you turn a case down, you would encourage a lawyer, and we do this on the personal injury
All the
side.
time.
If we don't think it's a fit, that does not mean you shouldn't get a second opinion. Sometimes it's really important to go get a second opinion.
It absolutely is, and I always encourage every client to go and get a second and third opinion. And so respectfully, if I can't take the case for whatever reason, I always encourage them to go and see Josh Wright or go and see another very smart lawyer, because they may look at it differently or see something that I didn't see. And we try to take care of our clients.
Yeah.
We care about it.
Time has flown, just 2 minutes remaining, but want to give both of you opportunity for a final thought. And Barry, if you would, you go first, please, sir.
My final thought would simply be, please be vigilant when receiving medical care. Ask questions when you go to the hospital. Take someone with you. And show the medical providers that you really care about the treatment that you receive and that you want to be informed and that you are knowledgeable. If you don't feel like you'll have the capacity to do so, always take loved ones with you or friends with you to the hospital or for a checkup that you trust, so that they can also ensure that you get the best care possible. And if in the unfortunate event that something occurs, first, make sure that you're okay, that you get the treatment you need, and then as quickly as possible, consult an attorney if you feel like you need to. Don't wait.
Yeah. What I'd say is this, and it's a little bit of a rehash of what we've already said, but you're not entitled to a perfect result with your medical care. However, you are also entitled to make sure that you are treated by a physician that does not fall below the standard of care. And if you've been put in a circumstance where you believe your doctor was below the standard of care and you have an injury, significant or otherwise, and want that case evaluated, there are lawyers in our state that will evaluate those cases. Although they may be conservative in which cases they take, there are lawyers that for free, through a contingency relationship, will evaluate those cases and get to one quickly.
That's good stuff. Appreciate
for being
both
on,
of
my
you
friend.
Thank
being
you.
with
Good
us.
to see you.
Appreciate
Enjoyed
you being with us as well. Thanks so much for joining us on The Attorneys as we wrap things up, how you can get in touch with the firm. We'll see you next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.